And we can start recording. So once again, welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Rachel Bernard, and I'm the Director of Graduate Career Development here at GSAS Compass, and I'm joined by my colleague, Francesca Finelli, Associate Director. Again, thanks so much to all of you for coming. And if you wouldn't mind, just so everyone can kind of see who's here, if you could put in the chat your department and your year. So like 4th year, English and Comparative Literature, 5th year, history, you know, just so that we have a sense and that you all have a sense kind of just what the departments and where you are in the program. That would be just nice if you're comfortable sharing that in the chat. That part won't be recorded, but nice to see who all is here. During the presentation, if you have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat too. It's probably easiest if you privately chat them to Francesca, because I can't guarantee that I'll see them, but she's better able to keep her eye on the chat. So that'll be great. Great, and really nice to see the great mix of humanities and social science PhDs we have here today. Okay, so as I said, for the first 40-45 minutes, this will be a presentation giving you some tips and tools and food for thought about career exploration, specifically with targeted at humanities and social science PhDs, which all of you are. So these are the things that we hope for you to learn during this hour. First, to better understand the broader context for career diversity for humanities and social science PhDs. So I'll show you a bit of data and context about that. Then to learn some new tools and resources for career exploration. Some of these might not be so new, some of them might be new, and to show you how to use some of these tools. And then we'll end, before we go into those breakout groups, by talking about how to set goals and kind of what to come away from this presentation with and what to do next. So first I want to, before diving into the content, I want to launch a poll. So I'm going to launch it right now. It has 6 questions. And I realize the full Likert scale is not available here, but just for each of these 6 questions, please write, this is an anonymous poll, write the extent to which you agree, feel neutral, or disagree with these 6 statements. And I can read them out loud. The first is, no one would hire me, I have no useful skills. The second is, my dissertation is my most valuable asset. The third is, if I don't become a professor, my PhD will be a waste of time and effort. The fourth statement, people who work in the business world are stupid and boring. Jobs in the business world are stupid and boring. And finally, I am both over and underqualified for most jobs.
Rachel, I'm not seeing the poll come up in my screen.
Oh, I'm not sure. 15 participants have voted.
Oh, okay.
So
That's fine.
it might be because you're co-host. Thanks for letting me know.
That's not a problem. Yeah, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I always wonder what people are seeing, but okay. So I'm gonna keep it open for 5 more seconds if anyone else wants to vote. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, end polling, and I'll share the results. I think all of you should be able to see this. So for no one would hire me, I have no useful skills. Good, most of you disagree with that. I disagree with that too. You all are eminently hireable and have many skills, many transferable skills. Dissertation is your most valuable asset. Kind of split on this. We'll talk about that. If I don't become a professor, my PhD will be a waste of time and effort. Good, I'm glad that many of you disagree with that, because there's so many reasons that a PhD is valuable regardless of the profession you go into, and will continue to be valuable throughout your career. People who work in the business world are stupid and boring, and jobs in the business world are stupid and boring. I know these were kind of silly, it's good to know that you don't hold this against so many people, but some of you do, but that some of you are have an open mind about jobs in the business world, but also maybe a bit of ambivalence among the group. And finally, the last question, this one I really anticipated, that for I am both over and underqualified for most jobs. Almost all of you agree with that. A couple of you are neutral, and none of you disagreed. So thanks so much for sharing those impressions. I'm going to close the poll and move on to the next slide. So Most graduate career advisors would feel that most of these, or that all of these, in fact, are myths, but very common myths held by people with PhDs, actually across disciplines. The perception that no one would hire you, or that your skills won't be useful outside of the academy, that your dissertation is your most valuable asset, often when you're applying for academic jobs, or for jobs as a professor, your dissertation is one of your most valuable assets in that particular industry. But that's not the case in many other industries, which doesn't mean that the dissertation itself is a waste, because you demonstrate a lot of useful skills there. If you don't become a professor, your PhD is a waste of time and effort. And then finally, one thing that we will talk about toward the end is that you're both over and underqualified for most jobs. This is something that we as career advisors hear all the time. And it's really, I think, reframing that perception is really requires a lot of work on the part of you, people with PhDs, on framing your experience appropriately for the individual positions. And so if you feel that you could be perceived as overqualified, you need to emphasize how committed you are, and know that you might need to start at an entry level for some positions because you might not have the work experience, even though you have other experience that could help you advance in a career more quickly. And same thing for underqualified. If you feel that you might be perceived as underqualified, then you need to demonstrate how your skills and experience are relevant and transferable for the position you're applying to. So this is really, you have a lot of control over the way you're perceived in this way, about the way you frame your own background and experience. Okay, so first we're going to start, as I said, one of our learning objectives for today is to understand a bit about the broader context for where do PhDs go, especially PhDs in your disciplines. And I want to emphasize here that part of the point of recognizing this broader context is to realize that you're not alone in your career exploration. First of all, PhDs have always gone on to a variety of different professions. It's not new, like all of a sudden PhDs aren't all becoming professors. That has always been the case. It's just now it's becoming more well known, and the conversation has taken on a kind of broader scope. But then how do people get there? They go through the exploration process that you're going through. So you're not alone in this. This slide is just an example of some of the efforts that have been undertaken in recent years to research PhD career pathways. So you'll see on here a couple of prominent scholarly societies, the MLA and AHA. Most societies have done at least some work in this. For those of you, whatever your professional, I saw some art historians and classicists, and certainly your societies have also been doing this work. Different foundations and the National Endowment for the Humanities have supported this work financially, and lots of research has come out from the Council of Graduate Schools, and it's an ongoing project this year with the PhD career pathways. So this slide is meant to spark your interest a little bit, and hopefully to maybe research some of this research that has come out and track it down. One thing that I want to encourage all of you, regardless of your discipline, I'm going to drop a link in the chat, is the work that the American Historical Association has done. In particular, this page here that I just put in, their Where Historians Work project. If you follow that link, it takes you to data visualizations for the work that they've done to research where 10 years worth of history PhDs have gone. And I think, even though it's only one discipline, I think it's probably the case across many disciplines that the breakdowns would look fairly similar in the humanities and social sciences. Okay, so this data is from the NSF Survey of Earned Doctorates. All of you will have to fill that out when you finish your PhD. They try to collect data about where people with PhDs in all disciplines from US universities go. And so this graph represents doctorate recipients by broad disciplinary categories, and you'll see, these are very broad categories. The percentage who have either definite employment or further study commitment at the time of graduation. And so you'll see for the humanities in 2016, it was a little over 50% of people who were filling out this survey who knew where they were going next. So again, that's to say, you're not alone. I know some of you are concerned that you don't know yet where you're going next, but almost half don't at the moment they fill out the survey. That means, you know, they could find something right after. You fill out the survey often before you actually get your degree. So most, you know, and people, it's not that that means we have thousands and thousands of destitute, unemployed PhDs. It means that at the time of graduation, not everybody knows where they're going. Of those who do know, a large majority are, you know, have employment, and by further study, they count postdoc as further study. One thing to note here is that, as you'll see, the share, that yellow portion for humanities PhDs has grown over the years, which is probably no surprise to any of you that the postdoc in the humanities is becoming more and more common. So this bar graph represents the, so of that 55-ish% who do have a definite commitment, what is that commitment? And so you'll see in the humanities that of that percentage, a large proportion, nearly 80%, that in academia, that's what they, for those who have definite employment, that is what they're going on to do. The NSF doesn't break down the data further to say what kind of academic employment, but that's where people are going. And then these other sectors, again, government, industry/business, that basically means like for-profit, green, not-for-profit, purple is other/unknown. And I do want to emphasize this is only for domestic students, and we'll talk a little bit about international students and the particular issues that international students face. But this particular data is for domestic students. So this is very broad and not broken down. So as I was mentioning, the American Historical Association, also the Modern Language Association, and other scholarly societies, and the Council of Graduate Schools and other places have tried to break this down a bit further to put a bit of a finer point on where people actually go. So what I'm showing you here is a pie chart from the AHA. So this is all of those who earned a PhD in history at a US institution between the years 2004 and 2013. So this breaks down further what is meant by academia. So a little less than half did go on to a four-year tenure track position. And then it breaks that down further. Sorry, it got cut off at the bottom for what this light blue is, but that's 4-year non-tenure track position. And then you see that gets broken down further. But then these are all of those, some of those other sectors. A sizable chunk is in higher ed administration, and so on. So you can see that they tried to put a little bit of a finer point on that. So this, this other chart is data from the MLA. This is different. So this is as in 2017, and I'm actually not sure, so this is a survey, their N was only 311. So they did a survey of people with modern language PhDs in 2017 to find out what sector they worked in, and you'll see a segment here is retired. So this is not people who earned a PhD in 2017, it's just all modern language PhDs. So again, looks kind of similar, that it's about half of people were tenured, and these could be, you know, very senior people, then some tenure track, non-tenure track, etc. They broke down K-12 education. So these are just some of the efforts at breaking that down further. And so I think, you know, one really important piece of information as you're exploring careers, and one question that we get all the time is where are the PhDs? What are my options? And I think looking at the data of where PhDs actually are is one valuable tool to understand what your options actually are. Okay, so now we're gonna move into tools and resources. So this is a broad overview, and the point here is that each of you will probably walk away from this with something different and a tool or a resource that you want to explore further. So this isn't gonna kind of be, you know, feeding you absolutely everything, but giving you a sense for where to look for these tools and resources and what some of our favorite ones are. So first, this career exploration is a research project, and like any research project, you need methods. And So one of those methods is continual self-reflection, and this can happen in a few different ways. Some of it is just being reflective and asking yourself questions, not constantly, because that can put a lot of pressure on you, but periodically. So thinking, am I happy? What do I like about graduate school? What don't I like about graduate school, and how can I change that? Or if I can't change it now, what am I learning about my likes and dislikes that can help inform where I want to go or what I want to do in the future? There are also tools to help with that. So I'm going to talk about Imagine PhD and show you that particular tool. But there are also, I mean, some of you might have taken a personality assessment like the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or some other, there strong interest inventory for interest, skills scan. There are lots of different assessments you can take, and some people enjoy those. And finally, one-on-one career advising is really helpful to assist you in that process of self-reflection and to ask questions that help you reflect on your experiences. And so Francesca and I are the two full-time career advisors here with GSAS Compass. So if after this workshop you want to schedule an appointment with one of us, we definitely encourage you to do that. So saying that research is a research tool is a bit, is a research method, doesn't really make a bit of a circuitous statement there, but really this is mostly online sources. So there's just a ton out there now, and some of you might be feeling overwhelmed by the volume and not really knowing where to look. But if you are tempted to look online, that's right, you should be. There's a lot out there. So you've probably found blogs, there's, Quitlet blogs out there, people talking about their own experiences coming out of PhDs. Those can be useful if you read them with a filter and try not to get too sucked into some of the negativity. There's lots of articles. Inside Higher Ed, if you read that online, every Monday comes out with a column called Carpe Careers that's written by a graduate career counselor. So those are very helpful, and they come out every Monday. And then books, one of my favorite books, which I have handy, So What Are You Going to Do With That? I don't usually put a plug in for specific things, but I just think it's such a handy short guide with lots of good practical advice too. We'll give you a tour of a few of our top other resources and some industry-specific resources that are really helpful too. And then as another part of your research, we talk a lot about networking and LinkedIn. One of my favorite ways to use LinkedIn isn't even necessarily to network and connect with people, but to research people's career paths. So I encourage all of you to start a LinkedIn profile if you don't already have one, and you don't even need to feel the pressure to connect with people just yet. But once you have a profile, you can use it to then just look at other people's trajectories. You can do searches for people with PhDs and see where are they and how did they get there by looking at their LinkedIn profiles. And similarly, you don't get the trajectory, but you have access to the Columbia alumni database. And so you can look up Columbia alumni to see where alumni are as well. Informational interviews is an incredibly important career exploration method, and I'm going to talk about that later in the presentation. And finally, gaining experience. This we won't focus on so much today, but a top tip is during your time in graduate school, especially if you're earlier on, to use this time to gain experience. That could be volunteer experience on or off campus, joining a club or a student group on campus, and maybe experimenting with planning an event or getting active in that group, taking a part-time job, working as a graduate assistant for an administrative office maybe, rather than as a research assistant for a professor, start doing an internship, anything like that. And I think people do gain this experience if for no other reason than you're trying to make extra money as a graduate student. But when you do have these experiences, think of them as career exploration, and also as skill development and skill acquisition, that these experiences aren't just, to make a little extra money or to have something else to do with your time, but they're a means of testing out and exploring different skills, having different knowledge areas, collaborating and working with different kinds of people. So really incorporate that into your self-reflection as well. Not only what you're doing as part of your graduate study, but the full experience during this time in your lives. Okay, so now I'm just going to spend a couple minutes talking about Imagine PhD, which is this fantastic tool that I mentioned. So when you log in and create a profile, first, I guess, actually, for those of you, if you just want to raise your hand if you have used Imagine PhD or use some, if you can do the hand raising method, if you have your videos off and you can just see for those of you who have, I'm just curious. But it is a tool that contains self-assessments, 3 different self-assessments, and also resources on the most common job fields that PhDs, especially in the humanities and social sciences, because that's what the tool is designed for, that they go into. So when you go in and create your profile, it will prompt you to do these 3 self-assessments. They take about 5 minutes each, and then prompt you to explore job families. So it's really one of the best tools out there for humanities and social science PhDs in particular. And the goal of using this tool is to narrow your options. So I think if you're feeling overwhelmed by kind of the volume of resources out there or the number of possible different directions and feeling a little bit lost, I think Imagine PhD is the single best tool to help focus you, understand your own interest, skills, and values, and then narrow your options into a few possible paths. I'm gonna just introduce you to the site really quickly in a second, but I mentioned also in addition to the assessments, there are these job family resources, and so this is just a screenshot of that page. These are, they've broken down, through years of research. And when I say they, this tool was developed by a group of graduate career counselors, people with many years of experience doing this, with a combination of backgrounds. Some of the developers have PhDs in a disciplinary field, and some have a background in counseling and in psychology. And so those are the people who developed this tool. And through a lot of research, they broke down the most common pathways into what they call job families. And in each of these job families, it has opportunities to explore that job family, see ways of connecting with others in that field and networking, skill building, and then tips for applying. So let me change my screen. Yes. Here we go. So I was deep in the goal setting section the last time I was on Imagine PhD. We'll go back to the main site. This is what it looks like when you enter. This is the assessment section. So they said these are quick, they're kind of fun. They expand your mind a little bit by thinking about your own strengths and interests and skills in a new way. You can do these assessments as often as you want, and they save 5 at a time, so you can kind of see your development over time. I've done a few of these, and my results change every time because I change and my interests change. My values have changed a lot since I finished my PhD especially. So, so these are, I would encourage you to all go in, do an initial assessment, and then again, do it maybe every year or whenever you kind of are at a moment where you feel like you could kind of use that moment for reflection. In the resources section, this is that page I showed you with job family resources, and I just want to direct you to some of my favorite parts, because there's a ton in here that you might, on the face of it, not realize how deep it is. But my favorite part is this apply section. And this is what I love, is they have analyzed, so for every job family, they have an analyzed job description. So they take a job description, in this case, it's an advocate position. So this is the job family of advocacy. And if you're like, this might be something I'm interested in, but I'm not even really sure what it is, this can help you figure out what it is, this full section. And then here you can see a sample job description. It's annotated. It can kind of guide you how to even read a job description and thinking about how your skills and experience might transfer. They also have sample resumes for that particular position, and it's always, this is a PhD in education, but it's always a sample resume from somebody with a PhD. And then finally, a sample cover letter. So those are, I just wanted to highlight that as one of my, some of my favorite parts of Imagine PhD that I think sometimes are overlooked. Now I'm gonna go back to the slideshow. Okay, what do you do with these results? We get that question a lot too. So once you've taken these assessments, what do you do with them? And so you take an interest assessment. It tells you what your top interests are. With those results, you can do a few things. So you can explore the job families in Imagine PhD. You can evaluate the tasks that you enjoy doing and the frequency of those tasks in each job family. So once you know your interests, you can then look at those job families and say, oh, this is, maybe there are kinds of jobs you hadn't even considered, but now knowing a little bit more about your own interests might help you consider things that you might not have considered before. And then also help you identify things that you don't enjoy and give you language to describe those things that you don't enjoy, which can also help you narrow down and remove some things from your list of possibilities. Skills, I think skills get a lot of attention when talking about PhDs, and the phrase transferable skills is used very often. And all that means is that, if you really zoom out from your work as a graduate student and distill that work and represent it in terms of very broad skills that can be applied in different kinds of job areas, this assessment will help you do that, and will help you articulate the, just again, give you the vocabulary to describe your skill set, something that's recognizable in different industries, in academia and beyond. So they can better help you articulate, identify the skills that you want to develop. So there might be areas that, like, oh, I actually don't have that much experience, but you'd like to gain that experience or get better. And then misalignments, it's always important too to know, like, sometimes you have a skill in something, but actually don't enjoy using it. And so that's important, and this assessment can help you with that. Finally, values. I think values get overlooked or just underemphasized, and it's something people don't talk about, but it is so important and a huge part of career satisfaction to have a career and to have a job that aligns with the majority of your values. No job is ever going to be perfect. It's never going to 100% align with your values, but the closer match there is, the happier you'll be. And so again, the values assessment helps you just distill those values. So is geography important to you? Is work-life balance important to you? Is it important to you to be in a competitive, fast-paced work environment? Is it important to you to be in a collaborative, collegial work environment? So these are things, again, that it can be hard to kind of distill these particular values from the experiences that we're having, but this assessment will help you with that. And that's kind of what these assessments are taken together. They give you language. It's great to do these even like before you come to meet, if you want to schedule an appointment. And then we can talk about the results there too. So I'm just going to go over these slides super quickly, and we can talk about them more in the breakout groups. But this gets back to the skills question. Looks like it sounded like at the beginning with that poll, most of you realize that you have skills, but I just wanted to show this slide. This is from an older survey, but done by one of the premier career counseling organizations, NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And this is what employers said that they valued. I think if all of you read this slide and look at these skills, you'll see that if you think broadly about your own experience, you probably have half of these skills, and could think of examples that demonstrate that you have them. There might be 2 to 3 that you want to develop. And that's fantastic. That's where people are. Not everybody has every skill, but I think these are the skills that are highly valued, and you want to have a majority of them. If you need a little bit more help in thinking about that, here's some suggestions for how to reframe your experience. So, and this is what is meant by transferable skills. So on the left column is probably most of you have at least most of this experience. If not yet, you'll have it by the time you finish graduate school. Teaching, designing syllabi, giving presentations, maybe doing field work or just dissertation research, and how that skill then translates and is transferable outside of the academy, and just to a broader audience, and the language to use to talk about those skills. So we can talk about that more later, but this is sort of just planting the seed for you to recognize that you have these skills. This slide, I know it's very dense with text, and the point is to not furiously write all this down, but it's just to show you there are a lot of resources out there. Some of these might look familiar to you, some of these might not look familiar to you, some of these are industry specific, some of these are very, very general, and you might not have thought that they would be helpful for you. But the main thing to take away from this slide is actually the link at the bottom, which actually, Francesca, maybe if you could pop it into the chat, that would be great. It's a link to a particular page on our website, which is Career Exploration Resources for Humanities and Social Science PhDs, which has lists of resources, both general and then industry specific. So you can use that guide to complement what you find in Imagine PhD. And the final point here about research, bringing this down to earth a little bit, is so after you've narrowed your options, so after you've done the self-assessment, after you've explored Imagine PhD, and narrowed down your options, then what are the burning questions that you need answered? And here's a list of what some of those research questions are likely to be. So what employers to focus on, what are the employers in my desired geographic region? This next question here, so what are the barriers to entry? Do I need another degree? In most cases, the answer is no. And I know many PhDs very understandably don't want to go to more school afterward. And for most jobs, that isn't necessary, but it's really good to know. A lot of PhDs are interested in working in libraries, and increasingly library and information science degrees are valued there in that sector. It's good to know that, and it's also good to know, if you do need that degree, ways of getting it like part-time at night while you are working, and just to have that credential. So that's really useful to know. Also, immigration status can be really important too. Like if you are not a US citizen or permanent resident, when you graduate, you have 1 year of optional practical training, OPT. But if after that you think you'd want to stay in the US and get sponsored for a visa, it's good to know. I mean, obviously, if, working for the federal government wouldn't be an option at that point, but even working for an organization that isn't likely to sponsor an H-1B visa is also, something you want to know and something you want to include as a research question as you're exploring. All right. Now I'm going to do a quick run through of informational interviewing, which is another hugely important and valuable research method. How many of you do know what an informational interview is? You can just raise your hand. Okay, a few of you. Oh, good. Okay, so a fair number of you know. So it's called an interview. It's really a conversation between you being a person who wants to investigate a career and ultimately get a job, and a person working in that career, or an organization that you're interested in working for. These help you explore. So that's what I said. This is, I think, in my opinion, one of the most valuable means of exploration. They can help you understand a job market and get insider information. So that research question about, like, do I need a library science degree to, to enter this? Do I, what is the hiring cycle? Like, it's helpful to know that in consulting, usually they hire in the fall for jobs that start 9 months later. So like, that's really important. Identify skill and knowledge gaps. So if you can talk to an actual person, say, hey, this is my background, what is missing? Can you help me figure that out? Just learn about someone else's career path. So hear their story, hear about things that they did, and see if you can learn from that. Gain confidence about your professional identity. So just the experience of talking to people. I think a lot of people find that really liberating, that you're able to kind of open your mind, talk differently. You're not talking about your dissertation, and it helps you gain confidence in talking about yourself that way, which eventually can help you be a better interviewer for actual positions when you get around to applying for them. They can also help you, obviously, I mean, informational interviews are a form of networking. So, hopefully you maintain connections with at least some of the people you do informational interviews with, and that eventually, and this is why it's always a good idea to start early, you can develop those relationships over time, and then when it comes time to graduate, or several years later, I hear so many stories about people who, have a relationship with someone, do an informational interview, get a job, are working in that job for a few years, and then an opportunity comes up. So that's another really real benefit. I just want to say they're not a way to ask about job opportunities, get your foot in the door after you've applied for a job, or to get personal advice, you know, like where should I move, or, you know, what is the best, you can get a little bit of like asking about the geographic region or something, but it's usually not appropriate, especially in a first conversation. But you also just want to make sure that you're not in the initial conversation asking, you know, can I have a job at your company, at your organization? So who should you talk to? So again, this is kind of after, once you have some ideas about potential fields you're interested in, potential organizations you might be interested in, then you have to find people to talk to. And sometimes those people aren't immediately apparent, but think really broadly about, you know, family and friends. Do you have an aunt or an uncle or a cousin or a friend from college who does this thing, or who might know someone who does this thing? Former classmates. Think about people who graduated from your department during the time that you were in graduate school. Where have they gone? Especially the ones, you know, it tends to be more publicized when people get that fancy tenure track job, but not necessarily people who've gone elsewhere. There could be faculty who could be helpful. Junior faculty who've been through the job search recently tend to have kind of more of these connections, but there are other faculty too who do have more off-campus connections, if it's people, you know, with connections in the art world or the nonprofit world, or who are active in human rights, or, you know, there are people who are more active off-campus. And also former colleagues. So some of you might have come straight from undergrad to grad school. Some of you might have worked for a few years. And even if you don't want to go back to that, you know, whatever you were doing before starting your PhD, some of those former colleagues might be helpful. Maybe they've gone on to do something else. You can tap into their networks. So these are just some ideas to jog kind of your own thinking about ways, who's actually in your network who you might be overlooking. And then warm connections. So these are people who you might not know personally already, but you have a good reason for reaching out to them. So alumni from all institutions you've gone to, Columbia, undergrad, even high school. Professional association members, so that's like in your scholarly society. Again, most of them are doing some of this work. You might not have been on that part of their website, but I encourage you after this to go to your society's website and look at their kind of like career resources page and see what you find. And some societies also have mentorship programs. Guest speakers or event participants, so anybody you've ever heard talk who you want to connect with, you can reach out to them. And then first and second degree LinkedIn connections. So LinkedIn is a separate conversation, but if you're on LinkedIn, you know, please reach out to those people who you're connected to. And then the arc of the conversation, these are 20 to 30 minute conversations, and mostly you're asking them questions about themselves. Ask about their, what they're doing now, how they got there. A good question that often doesn't get asked is, where do you see yourself going next? So that you understand the career trajectories possible in that industry. And then finally, if they have any advice for you. And another one thing that a lot of people don't think to ask, but it can be really helpful, is question 4A, what individuals or organizations do they suggest you connect with or explore? So this is a way of using your existing network to expand your network. So after you've talked to somebody for 20 minutes, then you can ask, where should I look next? Do you have ideas for particular organizations, or is there someone else you could connect me with? Okay, so the end here before we go into breakout groups is all about goal setting. So what are you gonna do now after this workshop is over? How many of you have heard of SMART goals? You can raise your hands again. Okay, some of you have heard of this term. So SMART in this case stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So it's always a good idea to set goals and make yourself accountable if you can by sharing those goals with somebody else. And the nature of those goals, so it should be something specific and clear, but possible, so it's achievable. And it's really important to give yourself a deadline for achieving those goals, and you know, a time frame. So maybe you have a goal that actually, you know, the deadline is 2 years from now. And that can be really helpful too in just organizing your career exploration process. So how to know what that timeline should be. So usually a timeline is linear, and indeed time moves in a linear fashion. But the job search process is a cyclical process. So kind of time moves forward, but you should be engaging in different parts of the job search process and the career exploration process simultaneously. So you all right now are probably at different points, but the biggest thing to take away here is you need to work backward from your anticipated graduation. So if you're going to be graduating in May, we recommend that you begin applying for positions 4 to 6 months before that graduation date. So from there, you then need to work backwards. How long will it take to put together your materials, your resume, and your cover letters? And then these are, on the right side, the self-assessment, research and exploration, and building a network. Those are all lengthy iterative processes that are going to be going on this whole time, even while you're applying. But ideally, before you're in the position of having to apply for a full-time job, you have some time, some months or years, to engage in that continual self-assessment and reflection, to do that research and exploration, and to build and maintain a network that you can then activate when it comes time to graduate and apply for a job. But the key is, I mean, we're in November now, so if you're graduating in May, you have time, but you do want to start applying probably in January to make sure that you have something lined up by the time you graduate. Here are a couple of example goals, and you might want to use these as your own goals. So again, it's specific. So the first goal, complete Imagine PhD assessments. It's measurable, complete all 3 assessments. So that's something you can measure. It is definitely achievable because they just take 5 minutes each. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant. It's obviously a really relevant tool. And then time-bound, giving yourself an actual deadline that is in itself achievable. So second one, conduct 2 informational interviews. This is something that's a little bit more out of your control, but again, what exactly, how many informational interviews do you want to do? What is the process going to be? By when are you going to do it? So these are 2 examples of goals. And okay, I just was looking at the chat. So now it's time for breakout discussions. So we will stop recording